everybody that they didn't agree with and line them up, kill them.
Line them up and kill them, right? And over in Africa, there's thousands of Christians being executed, right? Um, there's been tribal warfare forever in this world. You can look in the newspaper, or I don't know who looks at the newspaper anymore, online, those kind of things. And even here in New Iberia and in Lafayette and surrounding areas, violent crime is on the rise, right? And so I'm asking all that because sometimes I think some people that I talk to don't feel like Scripture is relevant to the world we live in. They say, hey, that was written a long time ago. It doesn't connect with us today. So I want us to look at Psalm 2. Psalm 2. I'll be reading out of the Christian Standard Bible. Again, not that it's any better than any other one, but it was a single column, and I like to use it for my studies along with about 4 other versions. So the writer starts off this way. I'm going to ask somebody else to read the first 3 verses after this. Why do the nations rage and the peoples plot in vain? The kings of the earth take their stand and the rulers conspire together against the Lord and his anointed one. Let's tear off the chains and throw their ropes off of us. Somebody else read it in a different version.
Why do the nations conspire and the people plot in vain? The kings of the earth take their stand and the rulers gather together against the Lord and against his anointed one. Let us break their chains, they say, and throw off their fetters.
Okay. So this starts right off the bat that nations are doing what? They're fighting. They're raging against each other, right? But what does he say the purpose behind it is? Against the Lord. They're selfish. The kings of the earth take their stand and the rulers conspire together against the Lord and his anointed. What does that even mean? It's the rule of Satan. Okay. Definitely there's an evil warfare going on behind the scenes. What does it mean in your own language?
It talks about us following our rules, regardless of how you feel about it.
Yeah.
And when you don't, you're actually going against God's word.
Right. Romans 13 is what you're referring to, right? God anoints and puts people in place, and we're to obey their laws as long as they don't go against God's laws.
We don't always understand why he put it. We have to realize that whoever's in charge, he put it.
Uh-huh.
For whatever reason. It could be chastising people, it could be bring them together. Whoever's in there, he put it.
Right. Well, he definitely let the Assyrians and the Persians and the Babylonians come in and conquer his people because his people had wandered away from him, and to bring them back. Manasseh, for example, one of the kings of Israel, 2 Chronicles 33, was considered one of the most evil kings of all time. He put his own children on the altar to Baal, which was a fire, right? He's worshiping a false god, a pagan god. But then while he gets led away with a ring in his nose like cattle, while he's in the dungeon, if you will, of the foreign country, he cries out to God. We know it was an humble and penitent and heartfelt, sincere prayer because God brought him out of that, put him back in Israel along with the people of Israel as king, right? It doesn't happen very often when a king messes up that bad, right? But yet King David did, and he ended up back on the throne too, right? But then you have examples, what you're referring to in Romans 13, where Nero is the emperor of the world at that time, and he claimed to be God, persecuted people, pagan. Rome was worshiping a plethora of gods and different religions. But in the context here, what he's saying, he's acknowledging that nations rage and that peoples plot in vain. What are they plotting in vain against? God. We live in a world, in a country where we have free speech and freedom of religion to worship however we want to, who we want to. But let's be honest, we have that freedom in God wherever we're at. And here's what I mean by that. Think of Daniel when the nation he lived in outlawed prayer to Yahweh. What did he do? He prayed. In praying, he went against their rules, and he ended up where? In the lion's den. Now we know on the other side of that, he comes out for the good, right? But the thing about Daniel, the thing about Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, using the example of a jersey, you know, you have an LS jersey on, or a UL jersey, or an Alabama jersey. I know you're a Roll Tide guy. You guys are having a good season again. Oh, don't it? But anyway, you have your jersey on, but sometimes people are fair weather fans. You know what that means? That they go for whoever's winning. They'll change that jersey and put on whoever's in charge, right? Whoever's winning. Kind of like LSU fans. No, I think they're still rooting for UL. Yeah. I mean LSU. No, but here we live in a world where we know that you're either standing with God or you're standing against God. There is no in between at any level. From the highest of the high to the lowest of the low, there is one God and one Lord, and that's Him. But every time there's a weakness, if you will, what do nations try to do? They try to come in and conquer another leader so they can advance their agendas. Makes sense? And you get allies and all that stuff. But what I want us to see is, as we just walk through this, he starts off and he's asking the question, why do the nations rage? But he says it's in vain. Why is it in vain? Do we believe that? Okay, I agree with you, and I agree with you. We do believe. We better believe it. But if we do, why do God's people all around the world, especially in this country, if we believe God's in charge, why do we get so bent out of shape and fearful and angry? We let people stir us up. Okay, so what button are they pushing on you when they stir you up?
Well, they misrepresent the truth. Say you know what the truth is because you read it, you did the research on it, and then you see them up there just flat out telling you something else, and they're lying. You know they're lying. It just makes you mad because you know that all the people that don't know the truth, it's just a battle.
Okay. So let me say this, okay? Right. See, Jennifer and I like to go to St. Croix. I think everybody here knows that. We can go there for about what it costs to go for a week at Orange Beach, give or take. Okay? But my point is, right now they're building barracks. There's several military bases in the area, ships in the area. They're using the runway there for the F-35s. 10% of the U.S. military is in the Caribbean Ocean right now for the first time in history, with tensions rising with Venezuela. Now, they say it's because of the drug cartel. Others are saying it's because of oil. Here's the bottom line. I don't know, and neither do you. We suspect, but we're not in those meetings. We're not in those rooms. We don't know what's going on. And I guarantee you the majority of the people in Venezuela have no idea. And a lot of them probably have no idea that there's even a military off coast because of communications. What's that? Oh, Venezuela, right. But it did. But what I'm getting at, Danny, is people get worked up over stuff we don't know about. We only know part of the information. What I do know, and it's okay to get upset about things where we know a little bit about, right? But how many times have you gone off on your spouse because you thought you knew what they were doing? Or how many times have you grabbed a hold of your child and you know, blah, 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 and they found out, oops, they really were doing what I asked them to do. When we don't have all the information, sometimes we get worked up and we respond to what we know or what we think. And what's going on here, it's been going on throughout time. I'm not saying we shouldn't be thinking about it. I'm not saying we shouldn't be educating ourselves on how to respond if something does happen. But God's either in charge or he's not. And if God's in charge, then why are we so upset? Why are we so discombobulated about what's going on in the culture around us? Because getting out and marching and protesting for one leader versus another leader, at the end of the day, nothing's going to change. There's going to be another leader rise up, and another leader come up after him or after her, and another leader after that one. Right? But the battle is ultimately against God. See, we see the fleshly, we see the earthly side of things, and that's what we focus on. But this is a battle going on since the garden, right? Over the hearts and souls of men. That we will either honor God as King and as the Savior, or we'll honor something else.
The Bible also talks about turning your face toward God and He will deliver. Through that, the country gave their heart to God, we wouldn't need to do all this stuff.
True. So he's saying here, this is the coronation of the Son is kind of the title, right? So why did the nations rage and the people plot in vain? The kings of the earth take their stand and rulers conspire against the Lord's and his anointed ones. In other words, why are they doing this? What are they trying to accomplish? Why? What are they trying to do here? And then he says, they say, let's tear off the chains and throw the ropes off of us. What is it about God that mankind, including you and me, because none of us are without sin, none of us are perfect, right? What is it about mankind that wants to get out from underneath God's reign and rule and do things our own way? Leave the president and Senate and Congress and all those and other countries out. Why do we oftentimes, that may not be the language we use, but why do we try to throw off God's reign and rule and do things our own way? Because that's what the imagery is. Let us tear off their chains and throw off the ropes off of all of us. In other words, what controls us, what holds us, we want to break free of all that. Okay. Right. He lets us choose. He lets us choose. So where does that desire to break free from God come from? Pride? Okay. Visual, okay.
We see Donald Trump, he's our president. We can learn from him. But God, he's our part time. Knowing that he's spirit.
True. There are people who believe what they can see, but so let's go with that. Because I can believe what I see, I don't believe most of what Trump says, most of what Obama says, most of what any of them say. That's the human side, right? They're saying what they want us to hear, good or bad. They're saying what they can share versus what they can't share. I mean, there's things you talk to your children about, your grandchildren about, and things you don't, right? For good reason. But the analogy here is someone is trying to break free from the ruler, from the king. And in this, it's not just individuals, it's whole nations that try to pull away from God. Picking up in verse 4 through 6. Justine, would you read that?
The one enthroned in heaven laughs, the Lord scoffs at them. Then he rebukes them in his anger and terrifies them in his wrath, saying, I have installed my king on Zion's holy hill.
Okay. So going back to what the two gentlemen said earlier, God sets his king up wherever he's at, right? If we believe that, then whoever's in office around the world ultimately got there as part of God's plan. But he's talking about a different king here. This is all imagery, okay? The first three verses we just read. God's response to people rebelling against him is to laugh in this situation. He's laughing and he ridicules them. He speaks to them in his anger, and he terrifies them in his wrath. What's that? What's he talking about? Use your own. What do you think those two verses mean? 4 and 5. Okay, he can and does control events that happen. Okay, we know in Romans that he works for the good of those who love him, but he controls all the things, right? What else?
I think, we gotta remember, he didn't want things to work this. So, all the times he kind of told him, God was playing and all of that stuff. He wasn't around the king.
Okay.
We thought we needed
When you think of dogs, dogs that bite, which dogs you think bite more than any other dogs? Pit bull, Doberman. I think the pit bulls in the 70s out of the top 100. Chihuahuas are number 1 and 2 and 3, and Dachshunds. Those little ankle biters.
I know firsthand.
I know you do, because Copper got you. But the little ankle biters bite more than any of them. So if a Chihuahua's coming up to you, you might get a little, I don't know. I mean, there's been people, adults that I know, that when they see a little dog coming, they run it. They're just scared of dogs. Usually because they got bit by something earlier in life. But not always, right? But it's almost as God's looking at him and saying, really? Little Chihuahua? I'll drop kick you across the room. Right? Now, I was talking with a guy the other day about a video that was going around of a pit bull standing up against a tiger. And it was just at the tiger. And then the tiger ate the pit bull. Yeah. Meaning there's always something bigger and badder than you. And God's sitting here throughout history. And mankind continues to try to break away and do it on his own and set himself up in positions of power and authority. And in this situation, in verse 4, 5, and 6, he's making the transition. They're breaking away from God. And when Jesus went to the cross, hell and everything with it celebrated. Because it looked like they had won. The disciples are running for their lives and hiding. Now we know, again, on the other side, that he's resurrected. And we've been talking in depth on Wednesday nights that Jesus is also our God and our King. That's right. He's our King. And that brings with it the ability to submit to him or not. But the thing with any king is it's a submission. Whether it's a submission to the authorities in this country or a submission to God on high, we have a choice, as Anita said earlier. But who installed the king? According to verse 6, God. God put Jesus on the throne. And according to Matthew 28, all authority in heaven and on earth has been given to God, has been given to Jesus Christ the Son. He is the King supreme. And so at a time, this was foreshadowing and pointing to everyone who wanted to be done with this idea of the anointed one, the Messiah, who would come up out of Israel, who would be the one true God. They didn't want that. And they sought to destroy him. God laughs about it because God knows he's a tiger and everything else is a bulldog or a chihuahua. You can't defeat God. And so he says, I have installed my king on Zion, on my holy mountain. He didn't do that with guns and tanks and aircraft carriers. He did it through a life that was submitted to him. who modeled what it is to love, to serve, to care, to be obedient. Philippians chapter 2, he says that our attitude should be the same as Christ Jesus, who being in the very nature of God, even though he's God, he didn't claim that and go, I'm God, you can't do anything. He chose, as y'all said earlier, he chose to humble himself and become a servant. And he humbled himself even to the point of death. So he could have raged, he could have kicked off the chains and said, I'm not doing it this way. But he did it the way God designed. And God says, I have installed my king on Zion, my holy mountain. Verse 7, I will declare the Lord's decree. He said to me, you are my son. Today I have become your father. Ask of me, and I will make the nations your inheritance, the ends of earth your possessions. You will break them with an iron scepter. You will shatter them like pottery. So now, kings, be wise. Receive instruction, you judges of the earth. Now, what's the transition here? It goes back to what we were talking about in the first couple of verses. Serve the Lord with reverential awe and rejoice with trembling. Pay homage to the Son, or he will be angry, and you will perish in your rebellion. For his anger may ignite at any moment. All who take refuge in him are happy. So just bear with me on this, okay? I've been walking through this. This is a passage that some people have read, people are familiar with, some people aren't. And as you know, I'm filling in for Dad this morning, okay? So read chapter 2 one more time, out loud, Justine. And then I want somebody else to retell what just happened in your own words. Go.
Why do the nations conspire, and the people not plot in vain? The kings of the earth take their stand, and the rulers gather together against the Lord, and against his anointed one. Let us break their chains, they say, and throw off their fetters. Though one enthroned in heaven laughs, the Lord scoffs at them. Then he rebukes them in his anger, and terrifies them in his wrath, saying, I have installed my king on Zion on my holy hill. I will proclaim the decree of the Lord, he said to me. You are my son, today I will become your father. Ask of me, and I will make the nations your inheritance, the ends of the earth your possession. You will rule them with an iron scepter, you will dash them to pieces like pottery. Therefore, you kings, be wise, be warned, you rulers of the earth. Serve the Lord with fear and rejoice with trembling. Kiss the Son, lest he be angry, and you be destroyed in your way. For his wrath will flare out in a moment. Blessed are all who take refuge in him.
Somebody tell us that in your own words. Retell it.
I think verse 4, where it says, the one enthroned that, you people, y'all are applauded. And I'm going to install my king, and he's going to be ruler, and just learn to live with it.
Okay, that's good. Keep going with the story. There's 10 verses here. How would you retell the story in your own, from start to finish? Walter put a good part right there in the middle, first part of the middle section.
I think he started with the mess we made, you know, of humanity.
Okay.
And then it shows how he's stepping in, you know, like enough's enough. And he's telling us how it's going to be. And with his kingdom is, he's prophesying the future also.
Right, he is.
And telling us that
Psalm 2.
we're going to wash them, or what we should be doing. We're going to wash them, we put in places where
Okay, yeah, absolutely. Anybody else want to add to that? You got two good explanations right there in the middle of it. Okay. So you have this painting, if you will, of the world's nations, those who don't submit or bend the knee to God. As Anita said earlier, they have a choice. And they're saying, I'm not going to bend a knee, I'm not going to yield, we're going to do it our own way. It looks like it's a weakness because of what's going on at the cross. We can take advantage of a weakness and we're going to laugh and throw off the chains and do things our own way. God sits back and goes, really? This is what you're going to do. Then he goes from that, he says, look, I'm going to set my chosen one on the throne. He's going to rule forever. He's going to take an iron scepter, which was powerful back then, right? And bust your clay pots, basically. His kingdom, iron against clay, iron wins. You can rise up, you can challenge, you can do everything you want to do, you can throw a tantrum, I'm going to do it my way. And he's going to let you. But understand this, I have installed my king. I have enthroned him. And he's going to pop you one if you stand against him. Sooner or later, it's going to happen. So now, kings, verse 10, be wise. In other words, you can rebel against me, but it's going to be foolish. You may get away with it for a little while. You may think, hey, I'm my own man. I'm in control. I'm going to conquer the world like Hitler thought he was going to do. But sooner or later, God's kingdom, God's king says, that's enough. Now we know from Daniel, the book of Daniel, that it was prophesied, as Danny mentioned the word a few minutes ago, that only one kingdom would remain standing. And that's God's kingdom. Nations come and kingdoms come, nations rise and nations fall. But God's kingdom will reign forever. He's saying, look, you can submit to my reign and rule. He says in verse 11, right? All who take refuge, verse 12, all who take refuge in me are what? They're happy, joyful, fortunate. Why? Because I'm going to take care of them. I'm going to protect them in battle. I'm going to protect them from the evil one. I'm going to protect them from death. I'm going to give them hope and a future. I'm going to give them meaning and purpose, a sense of belonging. It's okay. All who take refuge in me are going to be all right. And so even at the end, he's saying, look, you have a choice. You can gripe and moan and do things your own way and be at odds with me, or you can submit. That's really what it comes down to. God's saying, my king's on the throne, there's nothing you can do about it. What's interesting is he's also saying, don't be afraid to his own people. Don't be afraid when nations rise up. Don't be afraid when the bully's on the block. Why? Because God has it under control. Our nation, this is bringing it down to when we were younger. Even now. Have you ever noticed how when somebody's really freaked out, they can get you freaked out too by all the stuff they're talking about? What are some things that freak us out? I'm using some old language here, freaked out, right? What are some things that freak us out or get us worked up? Physical danger. Absolutely. Politics all day long. Religion. All throughout time. Death has been conquered. World, death is your sting. He's the king, eternal, forever. 1 Corinthians 13, that Jesus conquered death. Paul would say that is the foundational principles of the gospel of Christ. And he says, where, O death, is your sting? Death has been swallowed up in victory. The last enemy, death, has been defeated. So God's people don't have to be afraid. Now, sure, there's the uncertainty of it, because we're our human side. But he wants us to take confidence and courage. Kings-wise, yeah, I may not like the politics of whoever's in office at whatever time of my life, but they come and go. I mean, really, my life's not a whole lot different right now than it was when Jimmy Carter was president, Gerald Ford was president, Ronald Reagan was president, Bill Clinton, George Bush, Obama, Trump, Biden, Trump. My life really hadn't changed that much. I still go and do what things I want to go and do. Might cost a little bit more. But let's be honest, we live in a society where people want to make as much money as they can. And so things go up and things go down. Not a right or a wrong. It just is what it is. So when I allow that kind of stuff to work me up, what is that saying about my trust in God? Humbling, isn't it? Because he tells us in Matthew 6, don't worry about what you're going to eat, what you're going to drink, or what you're going to wear. Isn't that what it boils down to most of the time? Eat, drink, and wear comes down to I'm worried about it. Why? Because whether it's plentiful or not, is there going to be enough for me? Am I going to get to eat? Am I going to get to have something to drink? Is there going to be enough clothing for me? Can I afford it? Is it what I want? I may not like the style, but can I have, is there enough for me? And God's saying, don't worry about that stuff. Pagans do that. Anybody in here a pagan? You need to understand, Jesus was talking to his people when he gave that sermon. He was talking to his people and saying, why are you so worried? I take care of the sparrow, I take care of the robin, I take care of the flowers. I want to take care of you too. So when we start seeing nations and kings and politicians rage, we get nervous because we don't know what the future is going to look like. And that's normal. It's almost like two kids growing up in a family where mom and dad are fighting all the time. You don't know if they're going to get divorced or not. You don't know if they're going to get divorced and who you're going to be with. You don't know. And so you get a little uncertain. Things have to happen sometimes. I get it. But it causes an uneasiness, right? But God, at the end of the day, is telling his people, I'm king. I'm God. I'm in control. Just trust me. Who in here has ever told someone younger than you, or maybe even older than you, just trust me? When you say that, why do you say that?
Been there, done that.
Been there, done that. Okay? Got it under control. But. I got it. Go ahead, Justine. I thought you were going to say something. Oh, no? Okay. Yeah, that's true. And that allows you to start trust with it. Okay. So, has any human being ever let you down with what they said they were going to do? Have you ever let somebody down? Has our government throughout history ever let people down? As God. And that's what he's getting at. See, we can be just like the kings of the nations. We can get so worked up and get tired of God, we want to do it our own way. And God's like, okay, but you're going to come back. And we do, if we're smart. And so, as we finish this up today, I like what he says in the last three verses, and I want to read them again. So now, he uses little k for kings. Now, kings, be wise. And then he tells them what? Receive instruction, you judges of the earth. So part of wisdom is receiving instruction. learning, listening. Then he says, be wise, receive instruction, and then do what with it? Verse 11. Serve God. At the end of the day, if you're going to be wise, receive this instruction. Serve the true king. Because he's the king regardless of who sits in Washington and who sits in Moscow. He's the king. And if you serve him, you're serving the most high, undefeated ruler of the world, God. And there's no reason to be upset or fearful. And then he says, pay homage to the Son, and you will rejoice, serve the Lord with reverential awe, rejoice with trembling. In other words, remember who he is. He is a loving, caring God, but the cross says he destroys sin too. If you're going to rebel, then stay in rebellion. There's a price. Learn from it. Then he says, pay homage to the Son, or he will be angry and you will perish in your rebellion. Translation. In Philippians 2, when he says, your attitude should be the same as Christ, right? He's calling us to be humble, to be submissive to him, to honor him, to follow his example. Because he says every knee will bow and every tongue confess that Jesus Christ is Lord. You take a knee and you bow to the Lord, King, and God. For some people, he's talking about present tense, but for some people it's going to be too late. That's what he's getting at here as the king. At some point, if you've not taken the knee and you're not confessing Jesus as Lord and submitting to him, when he returns, and he will, you're either going to be welcomed in or you're going to be welcomed out. That's what he's getting at. But he says all who take refuge in him will be saved. Not in their finances, not in their family name, not in the size of their house or their education, but in him. And that's where ultimate peace and victory comes from. So when everybody else in the world's going crazy, including me at times, it's important that we take refuge in him and know he's got it under control. That's hard to do sometimes. But I'm finding the older I get, the older my friends get, that would be y'all, I get to learn wisdom from y'all because you speak about things God's done in your life. And the stuff that you've been through, the battles you've been through, the horrors, God brought you through them. He's the same God yesterday, today, and tomorrow, and that family is here. So anyway, thank y'all, and we'll get ready for the next thing.